I have a confession that I need to make. For the last several years, I've been having an affair. She's in her mid-20s, really attractive. The neat part is we don't even know each other's names. But I know how to track her down because I know her number. It's Grizzly Bear number 64. And this relationship that I've had with her and with other bears has been really instructive for me. It's taught me a lot about how we can live with wildlife. And I want to share some of that with you. The biggest lessons that I've learned is that it's all about mutual respect and mutual tolerance. I'm going to tell a little story about the tolerance that she's shown me over the years. And this took place many years ago when she had an earlier litter of cubs, and it was on a busy trail just a short distance from the town of Banff. And I had to go down there and determine whether that trail needed to be closed or not because there'd been some grizzly bear sightings during the day. And as I was walking down that trail, I don't know what happened first, if I saw something out of the corner of my eye or if I heard this crunching noise of bones. And I saw her. She was staring right at me a really short distance away, about 15 feet away. She had her cubs beside her, and she was feeding on an elk carcass. Now, for those of you that know a little bit about grizzly bears, you know this is a worst-case scenario. We've got a grizzly bear and a carcass. She's got cubs, and we're making direct eye contact. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, Steve, you've totally blown it. And what happened? After what seemed like an eternity, but was probably about 2 seconds in reality, she looked down and kept on feeding. I walked away quite quickly, tried to figure out how to get my heart out of my throat, back down into my chest. And I reflected on that experience and numerous other ones that myself and my colleagues have had over the years, and all this data that we've collected from doing research on bears in places like Banff and Lake Louise and Kananaskis country. And here's one of the big insights that I want to leave you with. And that is that grizzly bears often like to come close to us. They do that on purpose, and they do it for their own safety. That might seem a bit surprising. It might even push you out of your comfort zones a little bit. And you might be thinking, well, what does a grizzly bear have to fear? Why do they need to be safe? Well, the reality is they have to fear other bigger grizzly bears. So for young grizzly bears, or particularly females with cubs, if they come close to human facilities, and a place like a golf course is a perfect example, they can keep their cubs safe by staying away from those male grizzly bears. So I think, we can all relate to this idea. Who wouldn't want to keep your kids safe? And I think if we understand why they're doing that, we can go a long way to putting fear aside and replacing it with respect. Now, why should we care about grizzly bears anyways? I mean, I've got an obvious bias towards grizzly bears, but the fact that I have this bias towards what a lot of people call sexy, charismatic megafauna species, does that mean that I don't care about all the other species in the ecosystem? And that's not it at all. In fact, the opposite is true. You see, grizzly bears are an indicator species, and they'll let you know if the entire environment is healthy or not. Some colleagues of mine in Yellowstone recently did a summary of how many different plant and animal species that grizzly bears directly feed on. They came up with a list of 234 species. So if you want to take care of grizzly bears in the environment, the first thing you do is take care of all those other 234 species. And in Alberta, where grizzly bears are a threatened species, we can think about them as being the canary in the coal mine. If they're not doing well, it's an indication that Alberta's environment might be compromised. That's an indication that maybe it won't be doing all that well to support us down the road as well. So that's the ecological side of why grizzly bears are important, but what do they mean to us on a spiritual level? I truly believe that grizzly bears have the capacity to enrich our lives, and certainly when we have visitors in Banff National Park that get to see a bear strolling on the edge of a lake like that, they tell us it's the highlight of their entire lives. But it hasn't always been this way. In fact, grizzly bears are one of the most difficult species for us to get along with, and that's why I think if we can learn to get along with them, we can learn to get along with any wildlife species. We have had a lot of intolerance. This might surprise you as well. But for the first half of the 20th century in Banff National Park, it was the job of park wardens to kill every bear they could find. Not just bears, wolves, cougars, eagles, anything that was considered to be destructive to other wildlife species was to be exterminated, and we slaughtered hundreds of bears. Once we stopped that outright killing, we continued to have conflicts with bears right up through the 1980s. They were feeding in open garbage dumps, causing all sorts of problems. We killed dozens of them each and every year. I think of our relationship with bears as having three distinct phases. This period of total intolerance, where if grizzly bear number 64 was trying to make a living in Banff 60 years ago, it would have been my job to kill her and her cubs just because they were bears, no other reason. The next period I think of is one where we were willing to tolerate bears only if they weren't tolerant of us. And that seems a little bit counterintuitive, but what I mean by that is if bears were willing to keep their heads low, stay out in the wilderness, not come close to us, we were okay with that. So 30 years ago, if grizzly bear number 64 was trying to make a living in Banff National Park, it would have been my job to kill her because she was too comfortable around people. We've moved to a new paradigm now, one where we've got mutual tolerance and respect for each other in Banff National Park. How did we get there? It took a major shift in our attitude and our thinking and the application of some simple solutions. The first thing that we did was tackle that garbage problem. It seems so simple now. You see these bins all over the place, but at the time, it was really innovative. So we closed down the garbage dumps. We put bear-proof bins everywhere. We went from killing dozens of grizzly bears every year to now, where we've only removed one grizzly bear from Banff National Park in the last 2 decades, and we're very, very proud of that. We put up electric fences around some of our campgrounds. In other campgrounds, we just went in and cut out the berry bushes so bears wouldn't go in there, just to keep people and bears separate from each other. We don't put out every single forest fire now. In fact, sometimes we toss the match and light them ourselves to create better wildlife habitat for bears and all the other species. We have an extensive public education campaign. We've got teams of interpreters called the Bear Guardians that roam our roadways and communicate with tens of thousands of visitors every year to talk about bears and other wildlife. And we focus a lot of our attention now on managing people, not on managing bears. We put restrictions in place on certain trails. They're small inconveniences for people, but they make the world of difference for a grizzly bear like number 64 that's trying to raise her cubs. Now, probably one of the things we're most well known for is how we've managed the TransCanada Highway. We have over 6 million vehicles a year that go along the TransCanada Highway, and that's a huge problem in a national park. We put up fences which have reduced our wildlife mortality of some species by up to 95%, and we built these crossing structures that everybody's probably seen if they've been driving along the highway, and people ask us, do those really work? And the answer is absolutely. For grizzly bear number 64 and every other large mammal species in the park, they've used these structures more than 150,000 times. In her case, she brings her cubs up there. They don't just zip across the highway quickly, but they actually stop and graze. They use it as part of their habitat now. It's amazing. Now, I don't want to try and paint the picture that everything is perfect. We still have huge challenges in Banff National Park, particularly with the transportation corridor, and it's a tough place for grizzly bears to make a living. The best habitat is only 3% of the park, the montane. It's the same place we have our town sites, our highways, our railways, our campgrounds, our golf courses, and it's a really difficult environment. In fact, her last litter of cubs, triplets, none of them survived to adulthood. We want to make a major difference with her current set of cubs, and that's where everybody else comes in. If you live around here or you come to visit, you need to start to think about, what does that respect look like? How do I live my life so I can show respect to these beautiful creatures? Now, let's think about a little bit of a scenario. It's a beautiful day like today. Who doesn't love to go out and have a great time recreating in this? I know I do. So if we want to go out for a mountain bike ride or a run and we go home, we throw on our shoes, grab the dog, don't worry about the leash, maybe just let him run free, and I'm going to listen to some music so I can really go. I put on my headphones and I head out the door to my favorite trail, that one that goes along the edge of the wildlife corridor. And my favorite part is crossing the bridge. You're on that bridge, and you can feel that fresh air coming through your lungs and the water going underneath you. You can hear that, and you're thinking, this is just fantastic. But she sees you coming. And she lets out a big woof. She lets you know, hey, I'm here. Slow down, but you don't hear anything. You don't see her. You got your headphones on. And all she sees is you running at her cubs full tilt. And remember, all she wants to do is keep those cubs safe. She doesn't know why you won't stop. And you brought a wolf along with you, it looks like, to back you up. And we have to think, how is she going to react in that situation? We want everybody to walk away from that safely. And we can. It's just a little cultural miscommunication. And we need to take a little bit of time, not a lot, but to educate ourselves. Go to a website like WildSmart. Learn everything you can and apply that action into your day, each and every day. I know that Grizzly Bear 64 and her cubs will appreciate if you do that. And if you don't plan on living here or ever coming to visit, you're off in a city somewhere, you've got a big role to play as well. Make your voice heard. Make sure that the decision makers know that you want to have grizzly bears on the landscape in Alberta forever. Think about bears or whatever species that resonates with you. Make it a touchstone in your life. Every time you reach for the light switch or the faucet or decide to buy something at the grocery store, think about going a little bit easier on the environment. I know that family group will thank you for it. I want to continue to have my affair with grizzly bear number 64, and I want her cubs to have cubs of their own, because after all, it's their world too. Thank you.